Welcome back to What the Flick. Francis Maxwell joining you here with Johnnie. Alonzo and Bibbs are sundancing their life away, so they are not here to join us here on The Flash. But we're back. The hiatus is over after Christmas. Now we're back with, I believe, Season 2, Episode 10, Potential Energy.
Potential Energy, and there was a lot of potential energy in this episode. I really, really enjoyed it. Aaron Douglas comes in as the villain of the week, the turtle, who has the ability to slow other people down, and you would think a villain named the Turtle wouldn't be very menacing, but he totally sold me on it.
Yeah, I was digging. I was wondering how they were gonna. I like how they tied that into what they're trying to figure out with Zoom as well. Like, I love when they tie in the villain of the week. This is what the Flash does very well. Is they bring in a new villain, which could fall into that trait of villain of the week, but they tie it very well into the overwhelming arc, which is how we're going to defeat Zoom. So I do agree. When he first came in, I didn't think he was very menacing, but then when I realized what he could do to counteract the Flash, it was very intriguing to see how he was going to try and figure his way about that.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Douglas was on Battlestar Galactica. I think he was in Leon the Professional. I think I loved him on Battlestar. He was really, I think he's kind of an underrated actor. I mean, he kind of just was very menacing. And in some of the scenes, you know, when there's battle sequences on The Flash, I sort of feel like I have to just let it go because really the Flash is so fast, maybe he could just take anyone out in 2 seconds, but when someone's powers to slow you down just by thinking about it, that's like a real threat. You know?
There's only one. You think about what could neutralize the Flash, and it's just by taking away his speed in certain ways. And some of the times when he's fighting with some of these villains, I completely agree. You're thinking, well, he's still really fast. He could probably find a way about that. But when you have someone take away his speed, it adds an extra incentive to it. But I wanted to touch on one thing, which was intriguing. So we get Barry at the start of the episode, basically in a dream, as Patty is being used by Zoom as a way to get to Barry, and that kind of pushes us into one of the main storylines, which is Barry fighting his self-conscious, whether or not he's going to tell Patty whether he's going to be the Flash or not, and that kind of transcended throughout, and he turns out to be the worst date ever as he takes her to an art gallery where he's not a fan of art either, so he lies to her there and then ditches her at the last minute. So when you see that relationship, what do you think? Do you think at the moment you believe that Patty is heading out the way she's up and leaving, or do you think she's going to find a way back into Barry?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like Iris is stuck around, and then his other girlfriend, what was her name?
Previously, who worked in the press.
Yes.
What was her name? I can't remember.
I can't remember. The sports journalist. She came back, so you never know with Patty. But the other thing with Patty is, I mean, this is his third girlfriend, so when the chandelier is maybe about to fall on her, like, I really didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know what, like, I'm always fighting my own thoughts to think, is she just a distraction? Because we all know, or will hope, that inevitably he's going to find his way back to Iris, right?
Yeah.
But at the moment, Iris has been pretty compelling as someone who's focusing on what she wants to do, and she's got her own issues going on with her now baby brother coming into it.
Yeah.
And it seems like he may not be really into Patty at the moment, but Barry Allen seems to me that he's very compelled by her and that he cares for her a lot. So it does put that storyline to the side a little bit and have you focus on what they two are focusing on as a couple. And Barry, as we know, is going to have to face this question with any new, I would say, relationship he ventures into. Is that whether or not he will tell his partner that he is going to be the Flash? Because he, as we always see with this theme, is that superheroes in many of these stories, they tell themselves that they can't tell them because it's protecting them.
Yeah.
But in turn, it never really protects them. She's a police officer. She's never going to be protected anyway. So I was kind of thinking when this new and still as devious Harrison Wells is telling him, no, if you care for her, you don't tell her because Zoom will inevitably use whoever you care for against you. I'm thinking to myself, she's a police officer. She's always there with Joe. She's going to be brought into it anyway. So at least now she'll be aware, though.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad to see, because I knew this version of Harrison Wells was going to turn out to be a creep, too. And this is the episode that sort of put the nail in the coffin on that, the way it ended. I also, I feel like the TV industry is just now becoming really comfortable with how bright and innocent and sort of classically American comic books are.
Yes, exactly.
And we're seeing sort of the move to TV for superheroes, and I think it's a much better format because comics come out in little increments and TV comes out in little increments. But it's so classically American. This episode, we have a drag racing scene.
Yeah, with what's his name? Taillight? Is that his Wally West's alter ego?
That might be it, yeah.
That's it.
But what I do kind of like is it's not classically American in the sense that the whole thing is completely whitewashed. There's a lot of diverse characters.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's still a problem today if you look at what's going on with the Oscars.
Absolutely.
But characters like Iris, Detective West, they get a lot of good development throughout the whole piece, you know?
And I completely agree, because when you bring in a iconic name like Wally West into The Flash and you portray him as a young black male, great step. Great step in pushing forward this diversity in the show. And I've always believed this show will be very diverse and very, I would say, forward-thinking in what they're doing with the show. But I wanted to touch on something, is go back to what we were talking about with relationships. I think Caitlyn needs to get Tinder or something, because she's just having the worst relationship problems ever. She, Firestorm previously had died, well, before he became Firestorm, has died, came back, and then died again. So she's facing double the heartbreak. Then she falls in love with, or doesn't fall in love, but seems to be falling for another new character in which she is truly seems to be smitten over. Turns out he's sick.
He's sick. But she kind of was making it about her.
Yeah.
She was like, how could you do this to me? It's like, he's the one that's dying sick. I usually really like that character, but that was a little bit selfish.
So she's now got an extra bit of incentive to try and, because the only way to defeat him, the only way to save him is to defeat Zoom. So now it seems that everyone has got their individual goals on defeating Zoom. We've got Harrison Wells wants to save his daughter. Now we've got Caitlyn trying to save her new love interest, and Barry trying to save himself. Anyway, because he seems to just be struggling to contemplate what Zoom is doing. We've seen now something that I wanted to touch on, and me and Alonso talk about this, is this season we've seen the Flash more vulnerable than anything else, because it's not just the fact that Zoom is faster and is more petrifying and ruthless, as we hear the story from Harrison Wells, kills everyone ruthlessly in that previous story he's telling to Cisco, is that he has that mental advantage over Barry. We've seen Barry at the start of this season really crumble and not want to be involved with any of his friends because he was scared for their safety, and now we see him petrified even in his dreams. Now, Zoom has got such a strong hold on Barry that I think Barry himself is looking at these distractions to try and prevent himself from going to solve the problem of Zoom, because he's actually scared. I think that you see for the first time, this superhero is scared of his counteraction.
Yeah, and there's so much riding on Zoom, like you were saying. Like they really pack that in and build that up and make you care about this sort of reoccurring storyline.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we touched on there, but now we want to touch on for the actual story itself, is what do you see between the relationship with Joe and his new son, Wally West, who's came into it? Do you see it's written in this, it was obviously written and scripted before that there's never going to be a happy mix, but Joe's trying to do the whole father-son, this is my son, and he's like, oh, well, you weren't really that good of a detective if you didn't know you had a son for all this time. But how do you think they're going to bond together?
I mean, it was kind of a rush job on his end. I think he was way overstepping his bounds right off the bat. But as we go along, I'm sure it's just going to be a trial by fire, you know. His name's Wally West, so...
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I've always proclaimed this in front of everyone. I do know the comics and the history of it, but I'm not as knowledgeable as someone like Bibbs, who knows it right off the top of his head. But Wally West was the first Kid Flash, I believe.
Was, yes.
So how do you see that characteristic of him coming to fruition, or do you see him kind of taking up his own role in this show? Or do you see him because we know that when he became the Kid Flash, I believe it's when Barry Allen dies in the comics. So I mean, I don't see that happening in the show anytime soon.
Right. Well, he becomes the Flash when Barry Allen dies, and was the Flash. Like, for me as a kid growing up, when I think of the Flash, that's the name that pops into my head, Wally West, because he was the Flash in my childhood, just like Kyle Rayner was the Green Lantern. And the DC Universe works in that great way where they do have these interchangeable characters for long periods of time. So I could see him being maybe not a sidekick. Who knows what could happen? He could be a fill-in Flash for a little while. Something might happen.
Well, it's interesting to see how they're going to take it. And they're kind of painting his character. He's clearly an adrenaline junkie because he's a drag racer at the moment. So it's interesting to see how they're going to push that character forward. But again, to wrap up, in the very last scene, we see Harrison Wells take things into his own hands, as the previous Harrison Wells has done before. And it seems like, did he kill Turtle?
I think he killed him, I think he killed him.
He's taking it into his own hands to try and...
Someone's going to notice that,
yeah, of
right?
course, that's the thing. And it happened before when previous season Harrison Wells would take these actions into his own hands and somehow try and escape because he was in control of the vicinity. He could adjust and manipulate the cameras, whereas this Harrison Wells is more of a guest, as Cisco puts out when he's throwing these things around. But how do you think the gang is going to react to that? Because as much as I want to hate him, when I try to put myself into the character's shoes and make this show as realistic as possible, but is there anything you wouldn't do to try and save a loved one? Because he doesn't know these people. He has been brought into this group and somewhat accepted, but everyone still holds that prejudice from the previous Harrison Wells. So it seems that maybe we're being a little rash on him by saying that, oh, he's being exactly like the old Harrison Wells, because he has got a different incentive to save his loved one.
He does have a different incentive, and I think that he just sort of is going to be able to talk his way out of this, probably.
I think he'll talk his way out of it, but at the same time, do you think the gang would be understanding if he said, Zoom has my daughter? The only way I can do this is by... And then maybe they can come up with a group plan. But again, everyone's got this fear for this character. Everyone's scared that Zoom might be watching at any time. So there's a difference there, because he could maybe come together with a plan with the group. But again, he might think that Zoom is watching him and is onto every move. So to wrap up, that's what I was going to get to, the very, very last point. We see now the Reverse Flash, I believe, coming into fruition at the very end, I guess from Earth 2, in which he's stating, how did he end up there? And is it Professor Thorne? Is that what he's called himself?
Yes,
so Professor Thorne is in the character. What do you think of that?
I mean, that's not the same actor that played Eddie, though,
No, not the same actor that played Eddie. So I guess it's some second world version of maybe Eddie's father or maybe Eddie's distant relative. I don't know, because when they talked about the Reverse Flash, myself and Bibbs kind of mentioned it's going to be Eddie. Like, it's going to be a new version of Eddie who's going to come into it. I was surprised that it wasn't him. So maybe they'll tie it in a certain way, because we know that when we look at the drastic scenes last episode, when the character who played Eddie kills himself to try and prevent that Harrison Wells from taking over, that was where I thought like, that's too harsh. Like, he's got to come back some way. Like, he was a good actor, he was a good character.
Yeah, he was.
And then when they brought Earth 2 into the conversation, I was thinking, there's right there. That's where he's going to come back. But it wasn't him.
It wasn't
was a different character, so I'm trying to think about who it's going to be.
I mean, it might be a little convoluted, but the great thing about this show is they kind of just throw everything in there and take those sort of big comic booky risks. So we'll see how it turns out.
Exactly. We will see how it turns out. And if you are somehow not satisfied with The Flash, which we are, I'm sure you'll be tuning in to Legends of Tomorrow, which is premiering tonight. We will get back to you whether or not we're going to be able to review that, but as you know, we've got tons of shows we'll try and review here. So we'll be back next week. Bibbs and Alonzo will be back from Sundance, so make sure to let us know what you guys thought of the episode in the comment section below, and as always, come back to What the Flick.